By the middle of this century, new data shows nearly two-thirds of all Americans will live in areas experiencing intense and dangerous heat waves. We're talking multiple consecutive days throughout the summer with temperatures over 100 degrees. UW professor Richard Keller, an expert on climate change, joins me to break this down. Good morning.
Good morning.
So just give me a preliminary look through the findings, first of all. This doesn't seem great. What are kind of the top line findings you'd like us to be aware of?
Sure. So the First Street Foundation's report indicates that within a decade, most Americans will be experiencing multiple consecutive days over 100 degrees every summer. And that may not sound like much, but really this represents a really dramatic increase in not just the intensity of the heat, but also the duration of the heat. And those two factors can spell serious mortality risk in vulnerable populations.
Let's dig into that a bit further. What is the practical day-to-day on-the-ground impact to people living in an area like that where you're experiencing that type of heat wave?
Sure. It really depends on where the heat hits, right? Because the increased climate risk is one factor, but social vulnerability is really the determinant of what kinds of health risks we're going to see associated with extreme heat. It's important to recognize that extreme heat kills more people in the United States every year than all other forms of extreme weather combined. Tornadoes, floods, hurricanes, they get a lot of media attention, but extreme heat is really the critically dangerous extreme weather.
Absolutely, and that's actually something we've talked about quite a bit on this show in the past with our former meteorologist, Dana Fulton. I want to back up a little bit. How do we know that this new data, this new research is good?
Sure. This is one study, right? And it's easy to say, okay, well, this is just one study. Who knows? There may be other studies that contrast with this. But really, this is reaffirming what we've known for quite some time. In the aftermath of that extremely deadly heat wave that struck Europe in 2003, with some 70,000 excess deaths in the summer of 2003, we've seen wave after wave of studies that has indicated that we will see extreme heat waves with greater intensity, greater duration, and greater frequency. That's already beginning to come true. We've seen this from 2015 through 2020 in Western Europe. Every single summer has had record-breaking temperatures. What this study is doing is it's confirming what we've already noted on the ground and giving us an interesting data model to look at the future.
Which, a good segue to the next question. Something interesting, unique about this study is you can actually enter your zip code and kind of find what the exact impacts will be to you wherever you are. So let's talk about Madison. Let's talk about southern Wisconsin. What does this mean for us?
Sure. Well, by 2053, this model sees us suffering extremely dangerous temperatures, upwards of 125 degrees on some days in any given year. In the near term, what we might see is, oddly enough, some potential benefit from a changing climate in Wisconsin. Perhaps shorter winters, perhaps longer growing seasons for some crops. But we also have to remember that while we may see climate refugees moving to Madison from hotter parts of the country, moving to southern Wisconsin from hotter parts of the country, those increasing home values may look like a good thing, but many Madisonians or many people living in Dane County might find themselves priced out of their own markets. So there are some negative effects as well. Another thing to think about is, of course, a longer growing season also means a longer mosquito season. In the mid-19th century, we had malaria in Wisconsin. It's not unheard of to imagine that it might return.
The billion-dollar question here. What could we have done to avoid this? Is there anything that we can do now?
Sure. I mean, scientists have been talking about climate change since the Earth Day celebration in 1990, at least. So there are plenty of things that we could have done already to try to slow the onset of extreme climate change. What we need to do now is look at serious mitigation. One of the most fascinating parts of this study that just came out, the First Street Foundation study, is that it's actually pretty conservative in its predictions. It basically bases this model on us undertaking serious climate mitigation now, on us limiting greenhouse gases now. It could actually be much worse than what they're predicting. So we need to take action to mitigate the advance of climate change as soon as possible. And this needs to be a global project, not just something we do in the United States.
So what I hear is there's no 100% solution. We just have to find ways to deal with it. Is that what we're talking about when we talk about mitigation?
I think that's absolutely correct. And the thing we need to think about is a changing climate is one thing, right? Those physiological factors are one thing. But really, we need to be looking at social vulnerability as well. We're seeing people die of extreme heat waves in places like Phoenix, Arizona, where this typically didn't happen before because Phoenicians know how to live in the heat. They have air conditioning and so on. But what's happening is not that just that the temperatures are rising, but we're seeing an expansion of the population at risk of suffering from extreme heat. Migrant workers who don't have access to air conditioning and who work long days in agricultural labor are just one example of that growing population of vulnerable people.
Professor, I appreciate you coming on this Sunday morning and sharing a bit of your expertise.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you. We will be right back.